Hey, what's going on? This is the Body Punch Podcast, and my name is Naz. Let's talk about the UFC's welterweight division. It's funny how one fight, especially for the championship, can make that division intriguing. After Kamaru Usman's win over Gilbert Burns, where he came back after taking a flurry of shots from Gilbert Burns, he came back, used that amazing jab that Trevor Whitman, his new coach, has deemed the weapon that has made him a champion. He used that against Gilbert Burns to get the win in a devastating fashion. In my opinion, the Gilbert Burns fight that Kamaru Usman had was the toughest test for the Nigerian Nightmare. Out of his recent fights, if you look at the Jorge Masvidal fight, the Colby Covington fight, the Tyron Woodley fight, the RDA fight, the Damian Maia fight, out of all those, I think his ex-training partner gave him the toughest test. So this brings us to the topic of this podcast. I really wanted to discuss the state of the welterweight division in the UFC. Also, not just because of the recent title fight. This is due to the fact that many of the fighters in the welterweight division have come out in podcasts or other forms like social media and talking about what their stance is on the state of the division, who they want to fight next, who they don't want to fight. And I wanted to talk about what this means for the champion and what this means for everybody else in the division. So I wanted to start off by giving an overview of the welterweight division. Like I mentioned previously, Kamaru Usman defeats Gilbert Burns by using that jab. Then after the fight, surprisingly enough to many of us, he calls out Masvidal. He talks about how that fight was short notice, how Masvidal keeps on bringing it up, that it wasn't him at his full because of the short notice fight. He had to make his training camp shorter, obviously. He flew all the way to Fight Island in Abu Dhabi, which made it even more tough. Because of all those reasons, Masvidal believes that he should get another crack at the champion, Kamaru Usman. And then Kamaru Usman brings up the point that Masvidal is using this excuse of the short camp and the short timeline that he had. And he's using it as somewhat of a get out of jail free card, if you will. Usman doesn't like that, obviously. He doesn't like the fact that his work that he did on Masvidal is now being judged a little bit lower And obviously, if we look at the fight itself, when Kamaru Usman went in there, he went in there with a game plan to win. And he obviously had the short training camp with Trevor Whitman at the time. They just started training together. So they were probably working out the kinks. Usman said, I got to take the shortest path to victory. So he used his grappling, got Masvidal against the cage, hit him with those foot stomps that we talked about and a lot of other fighters started to implement after that fight. But that's the fight that Kamaru Usman and Masvidal won. Now, there's another factor that goes into this. Colby Covington and Masvidal were supposed to fight each other and then also be the coaches for the Tough series, the TV show that happens. So because they don't want to fight each other, Colby Covington came out in an interview with Submission Radio saying that Masvidal was the one saying that he doesn't want to fight him. And because of that, now there's talks of Usman and Masvidal being coaches for the Tough TV show. And then later on, after that's finished, having a championship fight. The other reason that this works out is that Kamaru Usman posted that he had a meeting with Dana White. Now, in that meeting, we can obviously assume that they're talking about his next fight. That's what you do in these kind of meetings. And it seems like Masvidal's camp, including his manager, is very interested in this fight. Having this rematch, it kind of works for both fighters. Kamaru Usman already has the added boost of knowing that he beat him in a unanimous decision win. And then Masvidal can say to himself that, hey, the last fight was short notice. Let's see what happens when I have a full training camp. And at the time, I think Masvidal's head coach wasn't able to make it either to the fight due to COVID. And then on top of that, if they have this fight, we're going to assume that it might be in the States. That could help in other ways. I've talked about it before, but I really think that the travel when it comes to flying to Abu Dhabi Fight Island takes a real toll on the fighters that have to fly to Vegas, then have to fly, I believe, 14 hours and then quarantine over there and do all that kind of stuff. Even though you still need a quarantine in the States, but it might be something that we're all a little bit more used to. And especially for Masvidal, who trains in Florida, it might not be as tough for him. And then Usman coming from Denver. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, and just to give an overall picture of what we're dealing with in the welterweight division, is that Colby Covington wants Masvidal. He believes that he is the rightful one to fight for the belt again. He thinks that he gave Kamaru Usman the toughest fight out of all of his recent fights. Now, Leon Edwards, who is scheduled to fight with Hamzat Chimaev, who's now coming to the States because his COVID effects are really affecting him. And because of that, he's coming to the States to get American doctors to help him out. There are lingering effects that have sidelined him. The fighter that was known and was happy to be as active as he was has now been sidelined. So that puts Leon Edwards in a weird situation where his last fight was almost 2 years ago, and it was in 2019 against RDA. When he was on his win streak, people were talking about him fighting for the belt. He already lost to Kamaru Usman, but now he's calling out Colby Covington. Colby Covington talked about in his interview, again with Submission Radio, that he doesn't want to give out charity fights. That's a quote from Colby Covington. Meaning that he doesn't want to fight a guy that hasn't fought in 2 years. They also mentioned Khamzat Chimaev, and he also put him in that category, that the guy hasn't fought anybody that he deems to be important. So that puts us in a weird, sticky situation when it comes to this division. So I was going through, and I think the fights that are next / what the fans would actually want. And the way that this works out is with all the interviews, compiling all the stuff together, who says no to one person, who says yes to the other person. And I think this is the best way that it could work out at this moment. There might be more news that pops up, but at this moment, I think we're headed for Kamaru Usman versus Masvidal 2. And that will be after the TUF series ends, where there'll be coaches. And then Colby Covington should fight Gilbert Burns. The reason I say that is because Gilbert Burns, in my opinion, again, gave Kamaru Usman the toughest fight in recent history. I believe that gives him a kind of pass. And I would love to see that fight again. Because remember, I do think that Kamaru Usman came back and got him with that devastating jab. I'm not denying that. I'm not denying how great Kamaru Usman is. But he did get dropped, even though he said that it was a slip. And the canvas being slippery and all that other kind of stuff. But I still think that when I was watching that fight, when Gilbert Burns hit Kamaru Usman, it was having some different effects, especially in that first round, at the beginning of the fight. So that's why I think that Colby and Gilbert, who are sitting respectively, Colby being number 1 and Gilbert being number 2, should fight each other. That will determine who's next. That will give us a nice fight with Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman 2, Masvidal, Colby Covington, which would be a fun fight. Gilbert versus Kamaru 2, Gilbert versus Masvidal. So I think that gives us opportunities for some fun fights right there. And then where I put Leon Edwards, because Dana White has said that the Chimaev fight is off and he's deeming it one of those cursed fights like the Khabib and Tony fight. He's putting it under that category. So I think that Leon should fight Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. The reason I say that is that Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who has reiterated this a bunch of times, is the only one in that top 5 division that hasn't lost to the champion. That doesn't mean that he should jump everybody, but I think that he still should get a chance to fight it eventually. He is getting in his older age, and then Leon Edwards just needs a fight. The guy's been out for 2 years almost. So that means that you got to stay active. He wants to be active this year. You got to give him this one. You got to give him something at least. We got to see where Leon Edwards is at. And it's no fault to his own. At the beginning, he was saying that he wants to fight ranked opponents and he was waiting for that kind of stuff. But this Chimaev thing that's happening and the other fights that were postponed, he even got COVID himself, and he says that he got it. He got one of those bad versions of COVID that really affected him. We need to see Leon Edwards come back. And I think the right fight is to have that Wonder Boy Leon Edwards fight. And I think they got to drop that March date. Leon still wants to fight on the card that he is on, but I don't think Wonder Boy is going to be able to make it for that. Maybe postpone it by a little bit. That does put him on the hiatus a little bit longer, but then you get Wonder Boy Thompson, who, if you get a win over Wonder Boy Thompson, I don't think it matters as much that he's number 5. He's still got that name factor. He's fought for the belt twice. He's the right guy to put you right back on target. So that's the way I see this welterweight division working out, and the way that we see it so far. Obviously, there's going to be news coming up. But again, it's so much fun when you got someone like Kamaru Usman, who's the champion, and then all of these amazing fighters. Because look at this. You go 1 through 5, even till like maybe 10. You got some tough fighters. Obviously, they're in the UFC. They're the best of the best. But this is the way I see it. I think these fights will kind of clear it up. It'll give us a lot of fun fights, the ones that I mentioned here. But that's the way I see it. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you think, how you would plan this welterweight division. It would be interesting because there's so many mixes and matches that we can make with this. But let me know your thoughts. It'll be fun to talk about it. So thank you for listening to this podcast. I really appreciate it. If you guys could like, subscribe, hit the bell notification on YouTube. Again, let me know your thoughts on this welterweight division, how it's going to play out. If you guys could listen to the podcast on the different podcast networks, give it a follow, 5 stars, all that good stuff. That'd be really amazing. Thank you for listening to this podcast. This has been the Body Punch Podcast. My name is Naz.